one for Moses and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, look, a bright cloud overshadowed them. A voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I dearly love. I am very pleased with him. Listen to him." Hearing this, the disciples fell on their faces, filled with awe. But Jesus came and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, "Don't tell anybody about the vision until the human one is raised from the dead."
My wonder for the day is whether or not you have ever felt like James, Peter, and John. The wonder is whether you wanted to capture a moment and hold it forever. There they were on the mountaintop with Jesus in a moment of transfiguration, of magnificence, of the divine presence. Oh, to live as a song from Jim Croce that I will not sing for you. But you know the tune, right? If I could keep time in a bottle, first thing that I'd like to do is to save every day till eternity passes away just to spend them with you. You and I know that we are connected to the divine in moments and just moments. And fleeting as they are, they can be transformative. And so far, we're not able to keep time in a bottle. We're not able to save it, but that doesn't mean we haven't tried. I'm going to ask Ben to share a slide. This is similar to the image I saw the night I arrived. The city was illuminated before my eyes, and I was drawn to the most magnificent cathedral I had ever seen. It is the largest dual spire cathedral in the world, lit in all its glory. Its spires pierced the night sky in such a way it seemed as if they touched the stars. It was so inspiring, breathtaking, and mind-boggling in its reality. And I could only imagine how the idea of such a grand building was shaped in the minds and hearts of a community in the year 1248. 1248, when construction began. No CAD, no OSHA, no lifts, right? In 1248, how did a community have the vision to make this? But they did. And it shaped the hearts and minds of that community for a long time. I wondered how you could dream something so big and so glorious for God. And you can slide the next slide. This is the interior nave looking east. This is the cathedral in Cologne, Germany. And I stood in that cathedral, the first one that I ever stood in, and it is mind-boggling huge. And I've stood there in that cathedral and in others over the years, and they are awe-inspiring. I loved the craftsmanship, the artistry, the acoustics, the colors of stained glass, the fine work of the broiderers who stitched together kneelers and vestments and altar cloths. I love sitting in the pews that have been sat on for hundreds of years by thousands and thousands of awe-filled pew sitters. I love the stonework on the floor, the beauty of the altar, and the smell of thyme and incense. It is truly a wonder-filled experience. But then my deeply Protestant mind starts whirling, and I do a little bit of cost-benefit analysis, and yet the whole community was employed, sometimes for centuries at a time. Do you know when this cathedral was actually finished? 1880. The same year this congregation was founded. 1248 to 1880. Now, in fists and starts at different times. And this cathedral has endured through world wars. And in World War II, it was avoided by bombers, the Allied bombers who would come into Germany on bombing raids for one reason and one reason only. Those two spires were their GPS. They didn't bomb it, not because they didn't want to bomb a church. They bombed many of them. You can go to the Gedenkskirche in Berlin, and there is a church that is restored and a church that is not, so that we don't forget. But they avoided bombing this one, not for any particular reason except for GPS. And so I wonder over the time about the artistry, the passing down of skills, the architects and the engineers that put their limits. I mean, how do you do that? Can you imagine building this period? Today, you can say, oh, can we put it on CAD? We can render it. We can do those things. This is someone's imagination, articulated in a way that is writ large. But I wonder, even though my breath is taken away when I stand there, why did they do it? Did they do it to tell God that we were in love with God or our own capacity? To create a boundary between sacred and secular? Somehow what is inside is sacred and all that is outside is not? Did they build it to stand guard at the door and to determine who could come in and who couldn't, who could partake, who could share the gifts of God? Over the centuries, great cathedrals, along with more modest edifices of churches like ours today, have been places of sanctuary and prayer and worship and song and sacrament that connect people more fully to the divine. They have been places also where exclusions were based on human rules that maintain power and control over people, where many, I am so sad to say, have been hurt or abused in the name of the Christian faith. So I wonder, on that mountain, did God desire a dwelling place of stone and wood, of stained glass and marble and gold and silver? Or did God desire a dwelling place much closer to home, not contained or controlled by human emotions, greeds, and desires, but by God's love, not only for humanity, but for all of creation? Perhaps another image could give us a glimpse of what I think is a better reflection of all the awe-inspiring cathedrals in the world. This is sunrise at the Helderberg Escarpment. My childhood home would have been in the black section, from the top of the mountain, like this one, or in the beauty of a dandelion that pokes up through an asphalt crack in an abandoned lot. Where we dwell in such moments, we know for certain that we cannot contain the glory of God. Maybe this is why God came in a cloud and spoke to the disciples. Maybe it sounded a little more like this. Let's get this straight, guys. Let's just get this straight. I've been talking to you for a while. Let's just get this straight. This one that's right here, Jesus, is my son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. God doesn't say, let me get you a subscription to church architecture over time. No, there's nothing about a flying buttress, nothing stained glass, no rose window in those descriptions. Nope, God doesn't say anything about place or structure. He gives one instruction and one instruction only: listen to him. So just what were they supposed to be listening to? Now, a little proof texting from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 4. From that time on, Jesus began to preach, saying, "You must change your minds and hearts, for the kingdom of heaven has arrived." Jesus also said in chapter 5, "Let your light shine like that in the sight of men. Let them see the good things you do and praise God in heaven." Further in chapter 5, it says, "You have heard what used to be said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be the sons of your heavenly Father. For God makes the sun rise on evil men as it does on good, and God sends his rain upon honest and dishonest ones alike." Those are the words that Jesus says. Listen to him. It goes on in many things that Jesus says, but no one can be loyal to two masters, he says in chapter 6 of Matthew. He's bound to hate one and love the other, or support one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and power and money at the same time. Treat other people exactly as you would like to be treated by them. This is the essence of true religion. Now, it goes on in Matthew. There is a lot of things that Jesus says. He talks a lot, my kind of Jesus, in the Gospel of Matthew. And if you want to know exactly what he says the whole way through, and you don't want just my little synopsis, you can go on either, some of you may have at home, have a red letter Bible. If you've heard of those, where they put all the words that Jesus says in red. And you can look it up online, and you can go through the book of Matthew, and you can see how much Jesus says. He says a lot. It's a really quick, easy way. You don't have to look for little quotations. Just go in there and find that red letter and to see what he said. And never once, somebody can read it all and check with me, but I don't think once Jesus talks about building a building. He talks about building up people. Talks about building up relationships, of building up community for the flourishing of life. And here in the story of brightness and presence, Jesus is consistent. The disciples fall to their knees at the sound of God's voice, right? Would you not? I think you'd be a little overwhelmed if God was like talking to me from a thundering cloud. Disciples fall to their knees at the sound of God's voice, and Jesus responds in a consistent manner. He reaches out and he touches them and speaks words of hope. I can't tell you, I've read this text over and over and over again over the years, and I forget that what Jesus does is reaches out and touches them. A simple action. But I have failed over the years to see how that models the steadfast and true way we are to be with one another. The touch that is Jesus is one of compassion, of relationship, of value, of love, caring, and peace. Patrick Wilson writes in Feasting on the Word, "This is the way that God comes to us in the world, not in the brilliant cloud of mystery, not in only a voice thundering from heaven." We can go to the next one, actually. Yeah. But also human, in a human hand, laid on the shoulder, and the words, "Do not be afraid." God comes to us quietly, gently, that we may draw near and not be afraid. God's glory is majestic and far beyond our capacity to receive it, that we can take just as much of God's glory as a human hand can hold. The measureless power that made the heavens and earth concentrates in a hand reaching out to us. It's all in a touch and words of blessing and possibility. The text read this morning says, "Get up," when Jesus puts his hand on them. This translation limits it to the physical one, the one that I struggle during children's time. Am I going to be able to get up? Right? That's what we think about when we hear the disciples are on their knees. Jesus reaches out and touches them and says, "Get up, do not be afraid." But the thing that we miss is that in the next verse, in verse 9, Jesus is going to tell them to be quiet about it. Be quiet about it until he says, "The Son of Man is risen from the dead." What we miss in English is that those two things are the same. When Jesus says, get up, he uses the Greek word that will also be used the exact next verse that says he will be raised up. That get up, don't be afraid, allows us the possibility, the probability, the reality of our own resurrection, be transfigured and transformed so that God's dwelling place is in our hearts. This action, these words of comfort and support and possibility contain the power of the transfiguration for me. It's in a simple moment, within a moment that we can keep and recreate. Maya, you did it. When Becca was in need, I didn't realize I was going to put her in that position, so I apologized to her profusely. But what did you do? You did what God does. Reaches out, holds us, comforts us, and we can only receive as much glory of God as a human hand can hold. You don't need any more. You guys already have that capacity. We can live that way. Now, this day in the church life is a day of transition. The green will disappear this week. Next week, when you come, things will be sparser and purple. We move from the brightness of Epiphany with the light of the star to guide us into the wilderness of Lent, a time to reflect and prepare our hearts so that we can once again make room for Jesus. Not to make the church a better place, more beautiful, larger, grander, but to do the work of loving and caring, creating, praying, serving, and worshiping God, not in this place. Not in this place alone, but in our lives, one touch at a time. One touch at a time. One utterance of get up. Don't be afraid. Allow yourself to be resurrected, to be made new in this day, to retain the brightness of God's love that shone on that mountaintop, and have that light be in you and present to all who know who you are. If you could save time in a bottle, save this moment of worship, of wonder, of reaffirmation of your worth, your value, your giftedness, your belovedness. And take the bottle and open it each day. And be awe-filled at the wonder of God's presence in your life. You are more magnificent than any cathedral. You are more magnificent than any cathedral, and more brilliant than any light. In all you do, remember this. In all the moments, cling to this knowledge. In all you do, live it out. You are what God has to make this world beautiful. Just do it and know that you are enough. Amen. Our hymn of response is